Welcome back to The Sensitivity Doctor. Dr. Amelia Kelley here, and I am so thrilled about the conversation I had today with Mark Hulsewé. He is a fellow TEDx speaker, and he spoke in his TED Talk about ending school shootings by reforming mental health. He's so incredibly passionate, and we both have the same mission: to reduce suffering, to reduce tragedy, and to improve the mental health of our students and children. Our approaches, however, are dramatically different, but I think they parallel each other quite nicely. If you're an educator or someone with a child in school or someone who just cares about this topic, I really think this episode will ignite your ideas, maybe challenge some of your ideas a little bit, and also give you a specific way that you can go out and actually help change the world with us. One other thing that I really appreciated about Mark is he allowed me, as I do so often on this podcast, to kind of challenge his thoughts a little bit. I think a lot of the things that he wants are the utopia we would all hope for within our school system. But I know from being in the school system and working in the school system, things need incremental steps to get there. And Mark, want to tell you how much I appreciate you letting me ask you the top questions today and challenge some of the ideas and see how they could really work in our schools. And I actually walked away with a couple aha moments and new ideas that I hadn't thought of. And I can't wait not only to share this episode with you guys, but he and I are going to keep working together using his beautiful filmmaking artistry to get this message out. So if you care about our students, our children's mental health, and the mental health of our nation, truly, listen in and enjoy the episode. Well, Mark, this is kind of like our intro / first big speak out together. Yes. As it is. So I'm just super excited to have you here.
Likewise, truly.
Yeah. I wish my talk was out already so I could share it with you.
I know, me too. Congratulations on that.
It's funny because when I heard about it, and I just realized it's not even just the elevation piece. It was actually chosen as one of the editor picks for the year.
Really?
Yeah, which is doubly crazy. I guess 40 out of 56,000 get chosen.
Oh my goodness, that's what the rate is. Holy cow!
I know. I didn't even know, except for Brian Bartz, who also spoke at the same event that I did and is wonderful. He had posted about it, and I'm like, that seems unrealistically high. So I looked it up, and I was like, no, that's actually true. So
congratulations on that.
But yeah,
phenomenal.
Well, thank you. And when I first found out, people were like, "Oh, I'm so happy for you." I was like, you know what? And this speaks to why we are talking today. I was like, I don't feel like it's about me anymore at all.
Right.
I don't know if it ever was.
Right.
I'm like, this is such an important topic and message that we have to be having a conversation about.
Yes. And the more we do, the more it spreads, the more we can actually start impacting our nation and our children that desperately need the help that they do not have.
Absolutely. Yes. So for people listening or watching who have no idea who you are today, but they will by the end of this episode, you and I were introduced by one of the curators of TEDx Raleigh because he thought that our missions were very similar and complementary of each other, and I couldn't agree more.
Right.
We are both asking the same question of how do we stop tragedies and violence and address mental health in schools.
Right.
From my perspective, I've been thinking about the early intervention through assessment and kind of changing our narrative on mental health. I don't believe that we can normalize anything that we're not assessing.
Exactly.
Because as humans, right, we assess what we think needs to be examined. And we can't say this is important and not be assessing it. But on your end, you're looking at more of the kind of the nitty gritty that even makes it where we need the assessments. And that's the emotional social breakdown in the schools. So what do you believe and why did you do your TED Talk? And what do you believe that lawmakers are missing?
What a question.
I know. P.S. Who are you?
I'm a man who just wants to change the country and help save these kids who are in desperate need of help. We have an epidemic of school shootings and suicides. Both of them have absolutely
Yes.
skyrocketed since COVID, but it was still a rising, trending thing in the past decade at least. And what really drove me to do the talk is to finally address it. You know, it's the elephant in the room that people are dancing around and nobody's really talking about doing anything. And you know what? I'm gonna just move forward and do something with it because not only see watching the kids themselves, it's from personal experience. You know, I went through those stages of humiliation and being bullied. And I honestly, the we have to start changing the words because bullying is too sanitized of a word. And that's what I kind of wish I
Oh, okay.
that's what I kind of wish I would have changed when I did my TEDx presentation. What's really happening is child on child abuse. Bull- Bullying is like kindergarten, preschool, you know, they take each other's toys type of situation. But when you escalate it to middle school and high school, these kids are absolutely sadistically brutalizing each other behind the teachers' backs. And that's the core element of why these tragedies are happening. Is because our schools are completely missing the mark and the point of emotional intelligence. It does not exist in the current school system. It's about, you know, get good grades, get to a good college, get a good degree, and you'll sing kumbaya. You know, they're not talking about how the kids are actually treating each other and the humanity aspect of this issue. So that's why I did. Go ahead.
Well, so it's interesting because I think I had shared with you that I was a school counselor for a while it was a Title I school, albeit it was an elementary school, but there was still what we're, sanitarily calling bullying happening. But I've also worked as a school-based therapist in a middle school and a high school, and I agree, and I'm going to respectfully challenge a little bit of what you're saying, but then also I love something else you're
Sure,
saying so
sure,
much. And this is what I love. I feel like we could have this conversation where we're like actually breaking it down in a way that maybe some of the decision makers should be.
absolutely.
There is, so being a guidance counselor, there are curriculum for social emotional learning. For example, my kids have it every 6 days. They have SEL. It's a class where they're learning these skills that you're talking about.
Beautiful.
When I was a guidance counselor, I was doing character education, is what it was called at the time, and we were doing the skills that you're talking about. I think the two of the big missteps is first and foremost, only maybe having the guidance counselor or some of the like more specialized teachers implementing these things. Maybe if it was more of a school wide thing, it would be more helpful. Although I will say my children's school does have a school wide initiative. But you said something that I had never thought about before.
What's that?
And as an abuse specialist, someone who works with that, it's that idea that we need to maybe identify the difference between like garden variety bullying that is, I don't know, I guess part of the social development of like the hierarchy, which we're going to get
Yeah,
to,
that's the point for that one.
in in children and the social world,
Right.
and what crosses over to abuse. And I was thinking you were going to say harassment, because sometimes it could also be, when we think of like online bullying and
Right.
things like that, it sounds very similar to some of the harassment behaviors that I have adults trying to get restraining orders for.
Yeah.
So that part, I was like, oh, I have not thought about that before. Like, we really should be rethinking just this overarching idea of bullying and call abuse abuse.
Yes. That's really what it comes
Yeah.
down to. And, you know, I'm tired of it being minimized by so much of educators. And I don't know why it's minimized. I've been told, you know, how it's always been, or this is what really irks me and upsets me, is when adults dismiss it as kids will be kids. You know, it's not normal. It's not healthy. And you know, when you have these kids un uncheck each other and hurt each other over a prolonged period of time, it just escalates over a period of time, and it starts off as harassment and intimidation, then it goes on to assault and battery, and then it goes to civil rights violations and hate crimes. That's that's why I did my film that I produced this year, and trying to get it out there globally is because the film was essentially based off of Columbine High School. It's based off of the overall situation of school shootings, but the core element is what happened at that particular school. It's the blueprints of why these tragedies happen, and it's something that the world needs to know. Those two boys, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were brutally and sadistically abused by the football team for years. That's what was covered up. We were given the narrative, oh, they were just demonic boys who liked video games, who liked to listen to Marilyn Manson, and that's why they did what they did, when that is the furthest thing from the truth. They went through extraordinary abuse where if adults did it, people would be in jail, period. But because it was the high school hierarchy and the high school environment, it was completely dismissed as boys will be boys, and nothing was really done about it. And that's what I'm trying to shift the entire conversation around.
What is the name? I remember, but can you tell listeners the name of your really beautiful short film? It was very well done, and where they can find it also, so that they can maybe even pause our conversation, go watch it. It's only 11 minutes, correct?
It is only 11 minutes. It's not available public
Right.
because it's been submitted.
Oh, I feel so special.
Yeah, because we just finished it this year, and I've submitted it to the film festival circuit. That's where I won a few awards over at the last film festival that I was in, and I'm currently talking to some individuals for possible distribution, so it can be on like Amazon or some streaming network for them to be able to watch it on. So that's what I'm currently working on for
Right.
listeners to watch.
Like I can say, other than it being beautiful, as watching it, and admittedly, I did have my husband watch it, so I guess I leaked it. Um, we watched it together. But the thing that really stood out to me in the film also was that it wasn't just the um, the shooter who was being targeted and bullied. You were showing, and not in a trite way, it was very well done, how the bully was being bullied by his father.
Right.
Like it was this string of abuse was not just starting for no reason. There wasn't, it wasn't just a boring Saturday and they decided to harm each
Right,
other.
and it never is that way. It's usually a cycle of tragedy, of abuse, of people hurting each other, and that's what happens. People, we're human beings, and we bounce off of each other's emotions and energies, right? And that's what usually takes place with these situations. A lot of the kids who are supposedly quote unquote bullies, they usually come from an environment where either the father's too hard on them, or there could be a alcoholic and drug problem within the parents. It just goes on and on as to why they behave that way. Or if it's not from the parents, it's the schools. The schools, the kids hurt each other. It's almost like their base foundation of trying to do that. And that's why I tried to convey in the TED Talk as towards why they do that. Because kids are essentially primitive to their amygdala, which is the fight or flight system. And we needed that. If you're in the woods, you see a bear, fight or flight, you better run. Survival, right? But now we're not in the woods anymore. Now it's the classrooms. So instead of the bear, it's the kid is too tall, too short, too skinny, too fat. He's too white, too black. He's a Jew, Christian, Muslim, et cetera, et cetera. The kids naturally, unconsciously segregate each other at a very early age. And that's where the bullying stems from early on. But then that escalates to violence later on when they get older.
And something you were saying about the teachers and administration not stepping in. I'm a big fan, and you'll probably, as we get to know each other, because we do plan on working with each other,
Absolutely.
hopefully on these our
Yes.
shared initiatives.
Yes.
Is I am a big fan of, when I look at a problem, trying to see the very actionable solution from the problem. Like, let's name the problem, but let's see the solution very as early on in the conversation as we can.
Yes.
And something that stood out to me about when you were talking about the teachers, because having been on administrations and worked in these settings, is that it's not, I mean, most teachers don't go into the field thinking, I just want to like teach mathematics and ignore the well-being of my children. Most teachers go into the field because, and administrators, because they care about children
Right.
and they do want the best for children.
Yes.
What happens often that I see is this chronic burnout and under support for staff, for teachers, and an excess amount of pressure to perform. There's a lot of punitive viewing of how you're doing, how your students are doing. And to your point, teachers are penalized on whether or not students are passing exams.
Yeah.
And even the like great schools ratings are related to growth, but you don't look at social emotional growth, you're looking at numbers. So my thought is, and this wasn't part of your talk, but I wonder if it could be something that maybe like piggybacks into it.
Right.
Shouldn't the social emotional learning also be applying to the teachers? Like, shouldn't there be maybe potentially a culture established within the administration for expressing concerns? It makes me think of the first job I ever had. I worked at a boot camp for boys who were kicked out of their
Right.
homes. And the counselors, I wasn't a counselor, I was called family service worker, but I was a therapist. The counselors were the ones who were like on the boots on the ground living with the boys.
Right.
They also had their own group ups. They called them, shout out to Three Springs for any of you listening. They also had their own group ups where the counselors were encouraged to call each other out if they had issues, were encouraged to bring things to the forefront. So I almost think if we're going to expect children to be doing this should also be applying to teachers and giving them the open opportunities to ask for help or to share when they're struggling. Which makes me think of one last thing, and then I really want to hear your thoughts on this, is that when I was a guidance counselor, I was given a schedule. That was essentially what I was given. Here's your schedule for, the character education. Go do it. Here's the testing materials that you need to do. Here's the IEP meetings you need to be at. And then that was the end of the guidance I was given to be a guidance counselor. Because I was going into the field to be a therapist, I had started the initiative at my school. And I'm saying this to any counselors out there. I know you're under a lot of pressure and you don't have all the resources you need. I had something simple. It was like a mailbox I had outside my door.
Right.
And I was Dr. Bailey at the time, or not doctor. I was Miss Bailey at the
Right.
time. Like Miss Bailey request. And they could slip little notes in there to ask to talk to me. And I would set up these kind of pseudo therapy sessions in the school for these kids.
Right.
This isn't happening in every school, but it's such a simple, easy thing that could happen, albeit I know the pressure is high. So I'm curious, you've talked a lot about changing the models. I'm jumping to the end of what I wanted to ask you about because I feel like it's important to bring it up
I'll
now.
go for it.
You had talked about weaving Montessori, Waldorf, Yale's ruler. I don't know what some of this means. What would a school day look like for the students if that happened? And would you consider how that could apply to the teachers? Because I feel like that's where it starts.
Absolutely. You made a lot of very good points just now. What Montessori focuses on is the honestly all three of those models, Montessori, Waldorf, and the Yale ruler. A ruler stands for recognizing emotions, understanding emotions, labeling them, expressing them, and regulating them. And that's what the core foundation is, and especially with Montessori as well. It's an environment where it's a holistic learning model, and most importantly, the teachers are more actively engaged in guiding the children. That it's not just test score driven, right? More of like a hands-on approach where the kids can interactively learn with one another. They also use mixed age classrooms, ages 3 to 6.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, ages 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12. So if there's a 6-year-old student who's very bright, right? They will pair that 6-year-old student with a 9-year-old who's on a similar intellectual level, and they actually guide each other. They help lift one another up, right? And in the beginning, I have some of my notes here. In the beginning of the school, every child is part of a advisory circle. So when they come in the morning, they spend 15 to 20 minutes with a trained mentor teacher. And that particular circle uses the Yale ruler method. It uses an anchored mood meter check-in. So the kids are, telling how they feel, whether they're sad or angry or happy, etc. They describe how their emotions are, whether they're tired or they're anxious or they're feeling hopeful. And the teachers model vulnerability and use a restorative prompts like who needs my particular support today, right? So that's essentially the foundation of what these models are, is teaching the holistic portion of what it means to be a human. That's where the public
Yeah.
institution and education has really deviated off course. They're too focused on just test scores, and that's your value, that's all that matters, and we're grading each other, and that's why so much of the system is catastrophically failing with our kids. Is because we teach them math, science, English, literature, which is all important, but where's the humanity portion of it? That's what's a core piece that's missing so much from the traditional systems, which if we were to take this other education models and have that available to all students in the United States, not just wealthy families that can afford it, but for every single student in the United States, we would see a dramatic reduction in suicides and school shootings.
And for anyone listening who's thinking, okay, how in the world would that work? Because there's so much pressure and so much to be done within one school day already. I will say I do see some of this, and you know what? It's an interesting conversation to have with you because I am very fortunate. We were really specific about when we were house hunting before our kids started school because we are in one of the top elementary schools in the state.
Right.
And I think one of the big reasons is some of what you're saying because the kids feel safer at the school so they can perform.
Yes.
So they start the day, my kiddos start their day with they call it the positivity project or
Right.
something. So they do their morning announcements, and the first 20 minutes is all what you're saying. It's like, how are we doing? What do we have ahead of us? Does anyone need any extra support today?
Right.
And they also have, like I said, they have this, I can't remember what it is offhand. I remember when I was a guidance counselor, we used 1, 2, 3 magic, which was much more about discipline. What they're using at my kids' school is something with like this color system, like what color are you?
Right.
And then if you're a certain
Right.
color, I know you're like, I'm loving it. It's kind of in line with what you're
Yes.
saying. And then also they have the SEL that they do, with each specials rotation.
Right.
So it is possible, I think, to integrate some of these
Yes.
things. I think what can sometimes become problematic is when we try to kind of like when I think about taking a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, are you saying have people jump the standards of grades, or are you saying like maybe like a buddy? Like what does the model say?
It's honestly a combination of both, because if there's, for example, a 6-year-old who is extraordinarily intelligent, they will put them in a mixed age learning classroom so they can learn with each other and be cohesive and support each other's growth. And that's what it really is tailored around, is for helping these kids maximize their potential. There's so many kids who feel inhibited by their particular learning environment, and if we were to put them around other students that helps them uplift each other and grow them spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, all those things, then it creates an environment of feeling safer, feeling more supported, and being able to maximize growth and potential.
And again, the model school, I do see, I almost see it as like a pilot. I'm looking at my kids' school with so much more appreciation now because they do pull them into, like my daughter's AIG in math, and they pull her into like an upper grade for her for math class. So she's not,
Beautiful.
it's not holistically right, but it is at least for that
Yeah.
course. And they also have like reading buddies where the older kiddos will go to the younger kids' classrooms and read to them. So there's a little bit of this happening, but what you're talking about is a complete overhaul, it sounds like.
That's exactly what it is. It's going to be a synthesis, basically, of those three particular education models of Montessori, Waldorf, and Yale's ruler education model. It's a blend of those three things, and having that model as the new standard of education for the United States. If we do that, students will, aside from dropping the main issue, what we're talking about with the school shootings and the suicides, we're going to see a massive growth in purpose. There is so many kids out there graduating high school and even graduating college, still not knowing what to do. By integrating these models at an early age, they get to have a better identity of who they are and why they are here, and learning how to express their abilities creatively and nurturing that particular model and growth for everyone.
So I almost feel like we should or could circle back to the teachers as well, and not in a way of like we need to put more on them, but I believe we need to be supporting them in the same way that we're supporting the
Oh, for
students
sure.
because for well, and for example, like I remember experiencing some bullying in middle school. I did not like middle school. Thankfully, I had my kind of subset of friends that I was able to stick it out with, but I don't even remember there being a guidance counselor. I didn't like know there was someone I was supposed to be able to go talk to.
Right.
It wasn't none of this was a while ago, but none of this was really discussed amongst the teachers either. And so like I was saying, that simple act of like putting a mailbox out, and when I go to these character ed classes, me saying, "Hey, if any of you ever need anything, you can be, you will not get in trouble for this. You're not going to be dinged for this. You can just slip a piece of paper in there." And I mean, I had everything from the timing is wild with this when I think that this was happening then, but I had everything from kids whose parents were being displaced due to immigration. I had kids who were getting bullied or not getting along. I had kids who we also had this amazing thing called the backpack buddies where we would give some of the free and reduced lunch kiddos backpacks full of food to bring home on
Right.
Fridays. Like, so I'm putting this out there because there are schools trying.
Right.
Like, there are schools trying.
Right.
But from this conversation, I'm realizing one of the missing keys is the modeling
Yes.
of the
Right.
adults doing this in a way that normalizes and makes it safe for the kids.
Absolutely.
So how would you take some of your ideas and maybe potentially apply it to the staff and the teachers and those who are supporting the students?
Right. Well, I do know with the three education models that I talked about, the Montessori, Waldorf, and the Yale ruler, the staff are trained in a very particular way to teach these kids in a very specific way. And that's what it comes down to is all of the support and guidance and financial everything that's needed to support the teachers and everyone involved actually teaching the kids and giving them the core foundation and structure to work with so they can know how to properly educate the kids in this particular learning model. So it becomes a circular form of positivity and education between the adults and the children. I know there's other countries in the world that follow something similar, like Norway or the Nordic countries. It's very involved how the teachers are closely uh, helping the kids, and it's a very interactive, very engaging learning environment where they truly care. But that starts with giving them the foundation needed to help the students. So that's where I would want our resources and funding to go to. We need to have a massive injection and funding into education for this particular model, and they would create a total overhaul of the entire education system. And that's how we actually stop these tragedies from happening.
Now, it's interesting you bring up funding because that was something that was very present on my mind when I was thinking about the approach that I want to take to try to help as quickly as possible. And you mentioned Columbine. You know, my talk was definitely inspired by a particular client that I had gone through a near tragic event with,
Right.
but it wasn't the first time I had thought about this. I actually had thought about my idea directly after and related to Sandy Hook. Something about that. I think because I was just starting a family at that time about, or kind of thinking about starting a family, and the thought of my little one like being falling victim like that was just so heartbreaking. I felt like that kind of compassionate pull to do. So I did reach out to some, lawmakers locally with my idea. Crickets, heard nothing.
Right.
And I realized that I needed to build more of a basis for me to even go out and talk on this.
Right.
I'm so thrilled and shocked still that I was able to finally talk about this idea. One of the main drivers also though is that it doesn't take a lot of funding. So the idea that I have could be minimally expensive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because what it is it's taking screeners that are, some of them are free, that are already working in, I had mentioned in my talk, countries like Portugal, for example, is a really good model to look at.
Right.
And inserting them into the everyday already. In my county, they just started a screener, and I got so excited. I tore it open. I'm thinking, yes, I'm going to totally opt in, because my idea, you have to allow parents to opt in and opt out of these things ultimately for their children.
Right.
And then I realized it was the teachers screening the children. It wasn't the children answering their own questions.
Right.
I've also, which I think is a great step in the right direction, but I've also been met with the adversity of someone asking, well, what if kids lie on these screeners?
Yeah.
They absolutely could.
Yeah.
But what if one of them doesn't?
Right.
What if one of them doesn't lie? And what if that student was a student who had been being harassed and tortured and who would have caused harm and tragedy for others? And what if, and they showed that out in, I believe it was, I know Utah, Colorado, a number of states out west, there was a statistic about a state that had initiated this, that nearly 10,000 students who had not been or would not have been linked up with services were linked up with services because of the screeners they took.
Wow.
So the proof is there that it works and it helps.
Absolutely.
My question for you is, we have the same, I think, end goal and slightly different, well, not slightly, pretty different routes on how to get there, but I love what you're envisioning. If there was a way to make it happen, I think that'd be incredible. How do you see our two directions maybe supporting each other? Or how do you see what I want to see happen supporting what you want to see happen?
It's a fusion of both. Like what you're doing with the mental health screenings, that's something that could be implemented every single year. So if we combine the learning model,
As I think it should.
yeah, we combine the learning models that we have of what I talked about with Montessori, et cetera, and fuse that with your mental health screenings, and it will drastically prevent, it's diffusing the bomb before it goes off, right? That's what it all comes down to. And it's taking as much preventative measures as we possibly can to stop these kids from wanting to hurt each other. So by combining your angle of wanting to do the mental health screenings, which is huge, it's like barriers, and not barriers, but it's check marks for kids to go through and to help guide them, and to see if there's any warning flags along those lines. So if we by combining those
Right.
two things, it'll make a radical improvement with the kids' mental health and prevent any negative thoughts from coming in and overwhelming them and just nipping it at the butt.
When you think about your idea and my idea, for anyone listening right now, what do you believe is the main thing? If you could pick one starting point, we know your vision, and my vision too is that we are just that mental health screening is so normalized that every parent thinks of it just like we do, a tuberculosis test or, any of the other physical health screenings that we do on a regular basis. Like it's just such a part of our culture that
Right,
we don't even think twice about it. That's my ultimate hope and goal, so that mental health is seen as normal and necessary as how we treat physical health.
right,
I understand trying to make a goal that brings us to the finish line usually keeps us stuck. And that's why even I want to pare it back even further and start with the DODEA where we don't need federal agreement. So that's all the things that I discussed in my talk.
right,
For you, you have this big vision, a huge vision.
right.
What do you think would be the first step forward, the most simple, feasible step forward that would get us to where you want us to be?
It's admitting we have the problem. You know how like Alcoholics Anonymous, the first rule is admitting you have a problem. You're unwilling to admit what the root problem of why these tragedies keep happening. And that's why I tried, that's why I wanted to talk with you a little bit earlier about it, is the social hierarchy in our schools. That's what is causing these things to happen. It is the unspoken caste system of kids segregating each other and creating the environments for these tragedies to occur in middle school. It starts as early as elementary school, but especially middle and high school. Kids are segregated in the quote unquote the social ladder from top to bottom. On the top of the ladder are the jocks and the athletes, the cheerleaders. If you're attractive, if you are wealthy, all these factors, you're on top of this little pyramid, right? And then in between, all the kids just try to fit in. And then at the very bottom are the outcasts that are treated like trash. They're abused. They're humiliated. And this continues before social media. It stopped at school, but now with social media, it continues after school. The harassment continues 24/7. And it's these kids that brutalize each other all the time. And that's what creates the environments for this to occur. So that's the whole point of view of what I'm trying to do, is to dissolve this hierarchy. And that's what these other education models do with the Montessori and Waldorf, etc. These kids care about each other. They empathize with one another. They want to lift each other up, right? I'm not saying that the athletes don't exist in these models. They do, but they're kind to each other. Compassion. Why is that such a crazy thing? And that's what we don't teach. And that's why I'm so focused on trying to teach about emotional intelligence as early as possible, so these kids have a better way of dealing with each other and helping one another. And that's what it really comes down to, is dissolving this social hierarchy of kids that are trying to hurt each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What, and you're saying that by us naming it and just identifying it as being a problem, that's step one.
Yes, that's it. Unless we identify that, then school shootings will never go away. We can talk about guns to our blue in the face, the AR rifles and stuff like that. The kids will find a way to hurt each other. Even if you ban those weapons, they will still find a way. It's not addressing the root cause. And that's social dominance of people wanting to hurt each other. That was the root cause of Columbine. And it's also this Secret Service. The United States Secret Service did an independent investigation in 2004 onto school shootings because they were happening so frequently. Why is this happening so much? Their conclusion: humiliation and bullying was the common denominator in all school shooters.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like It's the ugly mirror that we are unwilling to face as a society.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that statistic because I could absolutely see how that would be the case. And, when I think about, as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about why these hierarchies exist, they're usually present for a variety of reasons. A lot of them has to do with fear of
Yes.
being misplaced out of the hierarchy. A lot of it has to do with the positive reinforcement that happens within the hierarchies and even within kind of the culture of the school as a whole, who is highlighted, who gets attention.
Yes.
uh, I often think about when I have a kiddo that's struggling, or I don't work, I work a lot with the parents now, and then secondarily with the children, and kind of more in a family oriented type of dynamic at this point. I used to work directly with the kids back at the beginning of my career, but what I'm realizing is that a lot of them, if it's funny, I was talking to a client yesterday and we were like, we just wish that her son could like own his nerdiness, like own it. Find your fellow nerds,
Yeah.
find your
Yeah.
tribe, find your people, like
Right.
be as weird and great at being weird as you can. And
Right.
so, and weird in a positive light. And so I think I see from this stance that kind of doing things to lift up and celebrate the people who maybe don't fall within the hierarchy could be helpful. And one very simple thing, I remember back in the day, I don't think superlatives are really in many yearbooks anymore. Am I correct?
Correct.
Right. And I think that it sounds funny, like it's kind of like everyone gets a trophy, and it's like, no, maybe they were harmful because we're highlighting that so much. So I'm going to say something really unpopular, I bet.
Go for it.
Why do we have a homecoming queen? Why do we have a prom king? You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. It's fun. I get it. I'm not trying to like,
I,
but
I'm t-
really, if you think about it, it's kind of reinforcing this hierarchy that you're talking about.
right. And the reality, and that educators must admit, is that in middle school and high school, popularity is currency.
Oh, absolutely. It's safety too.
Yeah, it's the whole tribal mentality, right? So, be part of the tribe, be safe, included, etc. And that's what these ceremonies and awards are essentially for, is rewarding and reinforcing that system, which is very destructive in my opinion. It just creates that
Yeah.
separation even more. I'll never forget. I remember chatting with this gentleman at the sauna at the gym a while ago, and he was a history teacher, but also a football coach. And I explained to him what I'm trying to do, and he told me something that just astounded me, and it was beautiful. And if we could implement this, this would be fantastic. He says he has something called the hero protocol for his students. What he does, he for every single junior varsity and varsity athlete, this because he's especially with the football team, he says, for you to be a part of this team, you got to realize that people look up to you. For the few of you that go on to be college athletes or NBA professional athletes, you're going to have a lot of kids looking up to you. So you're going to learn what that means right here, right now. In school, go to the unpopular kids. In the cafeteria, the kid that sits by himself, and you know who that is, sit with him, talk with him, be
I
a
love that.
you don't have to be best friends with him, but just make
Right.
him feel
But at
seen.
least see them as human.
See them as a human being, just something like that. And if you don't, you're kicked off the team. I don't care how good you are, right? So that coach has
I love that.
his incredible morals, and he
Yeah.
and because of that implementation of the hero protocol, those kids who felt unseen and unheard, all of a sudden they talk more. They're not skipping classes. They have a smile on their face when they go to school, right? Again, just being kind and being human to each other. It's the simplest thing in the world, right? This can be broken down in so many ways. How I talked about awareness and consciousness and X, Y, and Z, but at the root fundamental base of it is just simply loving and caring for each other as human beings. If we
I
just
love that
go,
so much. I love that. I
Yeah.
feel like when I asked you what's the first step that we could take, I feel like that could be the first step. Like each school finding your version of the hero protocol, because if
Yes.
you think about it, that also is a way of belonging. Like if you
Absolutely.
belong because you are being a hero, because you are following that protocol.
Right.
And I think it's really important to remember that we don't need people low on the hierarchy or the social rung for other
Right.
people to still be doing well. Like everyone in
Yes.
school, right? Everyone in school benefits if everyone in school benefits. And
Exactly.
so I love your message. I am so excited to continue collaborating with you. Like we definitely have to have a, kind of a sit
We're
down
wearing
and talk about
our
that.
colors. We're wearing our red and black.
Oh yeah, we're doing the TED colors. I did not even think about that. I'm doing an episode later this afternoon about how to survive a holiday breakup, a breakup around the holidays with a relationship coach, and I was like, oh, red holidays. And so it's like,
Yeah.
so I'm like, I'm just gonna wear that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for anyone who wants to check out your talk or your work and stay connected to you as you and I start, supporting each other's missions, where can they find you and where can they find the talk and what is it called?
If you just go on YouTube, type in ending school shootings, Mark, and it'll be the very first video that pop up. I'm working on creating a website to create a forum so people can start collaborating and talking about these issues. But that's where you primarily find me. And I'm working towards distribution for my film on major platforms so everyone can see that as well.
Awesome. And for any of you listening who is thinking, what is my next step? What can I do? First and foremost, I had asked folks at the end of my talk to reach out to your principal, your administrator, superintendent, but also the PTA, because the PTA, they rally and they show up and they try to get initiatives going because it's their
Right.
students.
Right.
So contacting these folks and asking for both of us, asking what is for your platform, Mark, what is the school's current social emotional learning curriculum? Does it exist? Knowing what it is, even as a parent, is helpful because then you can dialogue with your child about it.
Right.
And then on my end, asking, are there any screeners happening in schools? And I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about diagnosing our children. I'm talking
Right.
about wellness screeners just to flag those who do potentially need to go seek out diagnosis. However, there are states and places in the world that are in our country that are offering mental health screeners. That's a completely different animal. I'm talking about wellness screeners that
Yes.
highlight mental health issues,
Yes.
but asking, is this something that we can make happen? Like we need to start micro to get macro.
Yes.
But if you're also listening and you're a teacher, please know, like, we see you. We know that this is a big hill to climb. And
Yes.
as Mark expressed, something simple like finding a protocol, like the hero protocol that you can talk with your students about. It doesn't
Yes.
have to be something else that you're measured on. It doesn't have to be another meeting or another massive initiative. It can be something super simple that can make the
Right.
biggest difference.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Absolutely. Yep.
yes. But Mark, thank you so much for coming on the Sensitivity Doctor. I'm so thrilled that we got connected, that we got to meet, and I look forward to collaborating with you.
Absolutely. It's been an honor. Thank you for having me here as a
Oh,
guest.
you're welcome.
Thank you for what you do. And I truly believe that we are going to help change this entire nation. The
Agreed.
troops are kind of rallying together, and we're going to create a spark and a movement for drastic change to happen. We're simply uniting our ideas. We have the same end goal, just different doing it. And it's just simply uniting these ideas together, which will create maximum impact and truly change the world for a better future.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Mark, and thank you everyone for listening and considering a different idea of how we can help support our students and our children. And be well, everyone.